Yeah, I don't know, man. You ever just feel like life is just catapulting towards like some greater purpose?
Pampered fat cats with bloated ego. We are the only DJ crazy enough to tattoo Jackie Brown on his ass.
This is Michael Mann, and I ride with
Extended Clip.
Welcome to Extended Clip. It is episode 461, and I'm one of your hosts, Eddie Averill.
I'm Malcolm Baum.
I'm JT White.
And today's episode is the start of our series on the television history films by Roberto Rossellini. Or should I say, the history films made for television. They are not about the history of, I Love Lucy to Taxi to Seinfeld. They are about the great historical events that shaped for the most part, the history of Europe and, by a larger extent, Western civilization. These are films that Rossellini made, starting with the one we're going to talk about today in 1966, but more prolifically into the 1970s, with a few more that we're going to talk about, a few that were even made as like television miniseries, like The Age of Medici is a 3-parter that we're going to talk about. You know Cosmo Medici, he's our buddy.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to learn about him. We're going to learn about our good buddy Socrates.
Okay, I know that guy.
Socrates, that's a big one.
Love his method.
Oh, one of the great methods. Now, I don't know if you know about this guy, Blaise Pascal.
Pascal sounds familiar.
So here's the thing. I know, for our audience members, I'm going to put it this way. So you've played your, FIFA 13. You've used Blaise Matuidi, the French soccer player. And then your 2K, your NBA. You've played as Pascal Siakam.
Of course.
You put those two together and you got the great Blaise Pascal.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're going to learn more about him, but that's pretty much all you need to know about
Blaise
Pascal.
That's why I'm so excited for this series, because I don't know anything about history.
Yeah.
So this is going to be an educational experience for me as someone who doesn't know much.
What's that old Otis Redding song? Don't know much about history. Don't know much about geography.
Oh.
Don't know much about science book. It's Sam Cooke, not Otis Redding.
Don't know much about science book?
Yeah, it's one of the best lyrics ever. So you can go to the back matter to learn more about science book. But today we're actually going to learn about history book with The Taking of Power by Louis XIV, the first of Roberto Rossellini's didactic period, his films of teaching his audience about history. This is a filmmaker who is often divided into periods, his neo-realist period and the modernist period, the Ingrid Bergman period, some would call it. But then not as much is talked about with his television-produced history period, which, as I said, kicks off here. And this is definitely the most revered of all of them. This is the only one that I think has its own standalone Criterion disc. 3 of the others that we're going to talk about were included in an old school Eclipse DVD set. But these are lightly stylized but mainly unadorned films that are just purely focused on education. Rossellini went into this project with an aim of pedagogy, an aim of being a man who will tell the next generation what it really was all about back then, with the essential stories that kind of explain why things are the way they are now, and they're apolitical films to the extent that he says they are, but there's always ways to read into them politically, whether they're of the circumstances of when they were produced, like this one. This is a pretty charged time in European politics to be making a film about someone ascending to power, not as charged as maybe when he was making his neo-realist films, but still there's a lot of political goings-on and radicalism at this point in time when he's making this very sturdy, staid, even old school and little tiny C conservative history film, and if someone wants to call it conservative to just focus on replicating history, then whatever, you're dumb. But regardless,
Yeah, you're not studying the history book.
You're not studying the history book. But this is actually a film that Kubrick studied quite a bit when he was going into Barry Lyndon for its dedicated approach to historical accuracy and representation. And obviously Kubrick is someone whose camera direction in something like Barry Lyndon is anything but quote unquote naturalist. It's very painterly and removed in Kubrick vision, but the lighting is all natural, you know. And in this film, sometimes you get some odd, unnatural lighting that creates some like very stark shadows that would not be in the Kubrick movie, you know. And the aesthetic strategies of this movie are so strange because it's like Rossellini is clearly a master filmmaker, and it almost seems like he's fighting against his own impulses, where he knows what the perfect camera move would be, but he's often restraining himself. This feels like an extremely restrained movie on a formal level, where occasionally you'll get some like tight 180 dolly track moves, you know, but for the most part, it's like pretty composed and staid and not even like showy in a compositional sense. It just happens to be that everything in this world is beautiful, so it looks beautiful. Malcolm, how did you take to this movie?
Yeah, you know, it is kind of like the visual style is, it feels kind of almost like stagey at parts, but kind of the way he moves the camera kind of prevents that. I enjoyed this movie, definitely, but it is, I guess I wasn't prepared for how straight up it is. I didn't know about Rossellini's educational intent. And you know, it just I guess as someone who didn't know much about it, I guess seeing this this young king, you know, kind of assert himself after the death of one of his close associates, kind of just him kind of going step by step, and you know, the film kind of goes step by step. You kind of see, like, it kind of lays all the cards out on the table of how he kind of I guess projects this image of being more powerful. That's kind of his goal. And you know, I thought it was interesting. I definitely enjoyed it, and I worry that it's going to be like hard to talk about these movies, but you know, like without just kind of saying what happens, because that's what the movie is. It's just what and that kind of sounds, I guess that's every movie, right? But like that, and like that's kind of like what, you know, is kind of the pleasure of this movie. I don't know if all of them are going to be like that, but if I had to guess, they're going to share some similar qualities. And with this one, it is just like you really see, you know, every employee for the palace, every step that, you know, this young king has to take to get where he wants to go. And it's very like matter of fact, but there is kind of some affect to it, especially with the unprofessional acting. And it's an interesting project for sure.
JT, what were your initial thoughts, and have you seen anything from this overall project of Rossellini's that we're diving into this month?
No, I haven't. I was very excited to get to this because, like, it's just a fun, like, late period kind of thing. I mean, it doesn't exactly, like, scream fun on paper. Like, I feel like my film school impression of, like, Rossellini was, like, kind of like an eating your vegetables. Like, Italian neorealism in general was like oh, you got to eat your vegetables, like, portion of, like, film history. And I mean, even, like, that's to say, like, there are many, like, everyone, like, I don't know, there are things that are boring to different kinds of people and whatnot. You can't make any blanket statements, but, like, the whole, like, especially getting into it, I was like the non-professional actors thing, like, there are some reasons why, like, especially, like, going in a little younger might be a drawback, but I really like a lot of those neorealist Rossellini movies. I like the other work of his that I've explored where he kind of, like, strays from that. And, yeah, I don't know. I was just, like, especially knowing his, like, early involvement with neorealism, this kind of feels like, on paper, like, felt like something that was, like, so diametrically opposed to that, but in practice, like, I don't know, I think comes right back to it and feels, like, incredibly akin, especially just the way, like, with what Malcolm was saying, like, depicts, like, just kind of everyone in the court. Like there are so many like sort of weird moments of like trying to present, I guess, the history of like everyday life and everyday living that I feel like are just like kind of fascinating to me and unique. And like right from the very beginning, I think when they're like visiting, like when they're trying to figure out what's wrong with this dying cardinal, like I'm not sure if it's just like the commitment to like depicting the times as they were or whatnot, or if it's like meant like that, like along with trying to mine it for humor. But when they're like smelling like his like piss
Oh
pot,
my God.
So sick.
It's so fun.
Sick?
It just like when
Yeah,
they're
it's
doing,
sick. It's
like-
disgusting.
like
and it's
they're-
awesome. It's funny.
like when they're
No, it
doing
does
all
roll,
the
yeah.
stupid like fake like science of back then, where they're like, yeah, we gotta cut him open and get out the bad blood again,
Yeah.
and like we gotta like
we
we
get some
gotta do that
crystals?
again.
Can we get some crystals in here?
Just like shit like that is like so funny, and like again because of the style of it all, it's just like funny on the surface just hearing them talk about it medically, but like that's what people were doing, and so it's just like, is this meant to be mined for comedy? Like ultimately the intention doesn't really matter. That is a very funny scene, and I think Rossellini obviously is smart enough to like tap into that, but it is like I don't know, just a very, very unique approach to a historical film that I had not encountered. And I mean, much like, I don't know, what Malcolm's talking about, like, it's just something that I feel like the further we go through these films, the more I kind of have an understanding of it, because it's just like, I don't know, something that's so different.
Yeah, it's a certain mode too. Like it is kind of like, I don't know, like you kind of, I feel like it does kind of rewire your brain in terms of like, you know, watching entertainment or something like this, like the pleasures that, you know, I and, you know, most people are going to get out of this. You know, it's not necessarily akin to, you know, our favorite Brian De Palma movie. It's a different type of, but Eddie's kind of saying,
speaking of Brian
like,
De Palma,
yeah, Eddie's saying like, well, you know, maybe there's some similarities there.
Well, speaking of Brian De Palma, I just want to say that the zooms in this movie are kind of insane.
True.
And throughout this period, apparently, and I'm the source here is Dave Kerr's like little capsule about the Eclipse set about these when it was first coming out. He invented a device to remote control zooms. Like Rossellini was like one of the first people with a remote zoom operator that he himself was using on the set of these movies, which is insane. But also to just like full on pull from Kerr here for a better description of the approach here. He says, sorry, I just caught a glimpse of him describing Cardinal Mazarin as a pudgy little man who looks like a particular debauched member of a 1970s heavy metal band. But he says, the dialogue is bluntly didactic, with characters telling one another things they would already know entirely for the benefit of the audience. The Louvre looming in the background is not an elaborately constructed set, but an effect created by painting on glass, one of the earliest and simplest special effects techniques. ... Rossellini isn't asking viewers to identify with his characters or become caught up in their personal dramas. Instead, he creates a detached perspective by dropping the whole system of close-ups and cross-cutting that classical cinema uses to envelop the spectator emotionally. Most scenes are shot in one or two long takes, using camera movements and zooms to close in on details or investigate relationships. Which is not to say the films are dry and clinical. For all his scientific ambitions, Rossellini remains an artist who can't help giving his work emotional shading. And I think the shading is what is subjective here. Like, is there emotional shading to these works? I would say that so far, yes. But there's also definitely a clinical remove, which I think Care, when he says that's not to say these films are clinical, he's like trying to sell you on buying the DVDs a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think these films can be clinical and be great, because that's what they are to me. I think they are highly clinical, and that's why they're so great. It's like the aforementioned piss pot, you know? So this film starts with Cardinal Mazarin dying, and he is like a very powerful man in the court of nobles. And once he dies, it's going to be like, he's just like, all right, I'll give all my wealth over to the king so he can do whatever he wants. And the king is a young man, Louis XIV, and he follows in the ambitious footsteps of his father, who built a giant palace in Versailles. And it's like, you know what? The king should be the fucking king. Like, enough with this government stuff that we're starting to develop. Like, I should be ruling everything. So the action of the movie essentially is him like both appeasing his mother and working with a couple of his main nobles to set up a new form of monarchy, with a little bit of palace intrigue, as it were, between Fouquet and Colbert, with a little D'Artagnan action in there thrown in as well for good measure. And the aforementioned piss pot scene, as I said, is a great way to start this, because this film is all about, and all of these films are all about, teaching and historical accuracy and representation. And I think that like you can be humorless about it, but I think that if you let yourself have a little fun with these movies, they're not gonna be so dry to you. Like, I get that it would be inappropriate to laugh during like a film school class showing of this, or a history class showing of this movie when he smells the pee-pee.
People would, though.
But like, you gotta
would,
laugh
though.
at that kind of thing. And it's like those anachronisms are like what partially make this interesting. I mean, the early special effect of version of the Louvre, as Care was talking about, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of stuff in here where it's like a mix of real historical environments that have been preserved as like museums, basically being used as sets here, as well as just like studio stages that aren't all that lush, you know?
Yeah.
And the costumes are like pretty accurate representations, I guess, but they're not like all that lush either, you know?
Until the end, of course.
Yes, until the end, to a point, you know,
Yeah.
because Louis XIV is all about getting a fit off, as it were. But that's the thing also, the modern look at this movie like brings so much humor, in my opinion, if you're like able to just enjoy it on an aesthetic level and on the level of like either learning or relearning your basic history lessons here, which is total relearning to me. Like, this is stuff you learn about like 15 years ago in history, in the world history class, and you forget by the time 6 weeks later you're starting to learn about World War One. You know, like the American education system is not exactly strong on world history. You do U.S. history from 1600 to 1942 about 5 times, and the rest of the world like 1.5 times.
Yeah. I don't really remember them talking too much about Louis XIV. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I remember 10th grade world history getting like a chapter on him, you know, but it's like you do that chapter and then you go on to what was going on in China, you know?
So like let's get down to the history. So like the historical significance of this guy is kind of like it's a prelude to like the French Revolution, kind of like the stuff he was doing kind of led people to revolt because he's kind of going too kingly, too monarchistic or whatever.
JT, how would you feel about that? That's a pretty accurate statement.
What you said? From kingly to
JT's like, what'd you just say?
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah, no, spin that back for me.
Yes, Malcolm, because that is true, because it's the opulence that this is all about.
Yeah.
And it's all about just like appeasing the peasants as much as you can. And it's just like, well, you know, it's a system that's not going to work forever, but they think they devised this brilliant system that can like keep the rich and the poor's taxes down, and nothing else really matters, except we're also going to start recolonizing too and like expanding the empire. And you know, I don't really know the economic specifics, but it makes perfect sense that this leads to you know, the revolution. The revolution, which people love talking about revolution, by the way. But that's not what this movie's about. So as I said, yeah, Cardinal Mazin, he's sick. They're trying to figure out how to save him. They suggest magic crystals as well as sniffing his pee-pee and letting his blood out. And they're like, all right, he's done. And so he gives all his money to Louis XIV, who's just like, all right, cool. I'm just going to like boss, you know? And so Fouquet and Colbert are like kind of his go-to guys in this whole procedural realm of like setting up the new version of the monarchy, you know? And it's a really interesting thing where it's like going back and forth between like him being like a proper Christian king for his mother and just like ascending to power in the way that his ambition leads him to. So they kind of immediately underline the tension between Fouquet and Colbert once he rises to power and starts putting these actions into motion, because Fouquet has been like, I guess, stealing from the treasury this whole time. And so their big like political action they do is arrest him to kind of show off the power. And you also get the, you know, procedure of him building his new costume. And you also get the procedure of what it's like for him to eat dinner on any given night. And that's like pretty much it for the most part.
It's about him taking power. It's him. He kind of like makes the decision, like he said, because isn't the guys you named, they're kind of vying. There's like, oh, there's a prime minister spot.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's like
yeah.
he's eliminating the power of the government in this case to just make monarchy rule again, basically. And yeah, so that's why also Fouquet is in there. He's like, look, man, I'm just biding my time. I'll be the PM in no time and be actually running shit. He's just going to be a little king in the corner, you know? But what I mean to say is by like, that's all that happens is that like, yeah, he very austerely and procedurally ascends to power, you know, reopens like the stuff at Versailles, gets that underway. But the film, like the third act, as it were, if there is one, is just like really just him eating dinner. Like it's not dramatically structured in that way at all, and I think that's why it's so funny to me. Like Rossellini completely refuses dramatic structure. It's like the first 40 minutes of this is Cardinal Mazin dying, and is that his name, Mazin? Mazarin, yeah. So not Craig Mazin. Cardinal Mazin and Craig Mazarin. Getting them mixed up there. The first like 40 minutes are just like Mazarin dying and Louis being like emo and settling up with his mom, you know, and just like showing the procedure of everyday life. And I find that so much more fascinating than what most historical dramas try to do, you know, like just getting into the nitty gritty of the procedural, like when he wakes up in the morning and all of his clothes are being laid out for him by like a dozen servants. And at one point his wife is like clapping, and one of the servants asks the other, he's like, what's going on? And he's like, she's letting us know that he fulfilled his conjugal duties last night.
Oh, is that real? Like, is that a real
that's
thing?
why it's in the movie.
So anything that happened in this movie is real.
According to historical texts that Rossellini was sourcing from, yes.
That might be the biggest odds and ends find. You know, I didn't know. They didn't teach us about that in a, you know,
that's why it's a fun history
the
class.
Queen claps after they had sex last night. That's
like,
interesting.
Look, he did his fucking job, you know.
Did his job.
Like so many of those procedures to me are so fascinating, like that last 30 minutes or so of him eating dinner. That kitchen, there's like a director of the kitchen standing on a giant pedestal yelling orders at the main chef while he has like 5 assistants of his own, and all these little ecosystems of servants and assistants and people running around to do these crazy procedures. And then once he's eating dinner, you know, you get a couple scenes of him eating one course at a time, trying them. At one point there's like a whole ordeal of bringing out the pork that takes like 5 minutes. He gets the pork, doesn't even look at it, and one of his servants is like, I don't recommend the pork. He's like, take it away. And the pork just gets discarded right away after that whole like crazy long take of the pork being brought out from the kitchen, you know? And it's very just deceptive in its style, or quote unquote lack of style, you know, in scenes like that. Or when he's like, can I get a little music, please? And you think a guy's just going to start singing, but instead he turns around. And first of all, when he turns around, the camera tracks with them to reveal that there's like 80 people in this room just watching him eat.
Yeah.
Like that's the whole entertainment for the whole fucking town is like the highest ticket item you could get is watching the king eat, you know? And then it swoops up to fucking reveal like the string quartet up there playing for him. And I don't know. I just found that stuff, like all of the details of the process, to be so fascinating and like why I loved this movie so much.
Yeah, and I feel like the movie does a good job of showing like this is strenuous, or this is a lot of ceremony for like a little result, in a sense, where, you know, I like just thinking of the day-to-day of you know, King Louis's life, right? Like there's just so many kind of middlemen that are kind of being like you know, oh, he can't enter this room right now, or kind of just like these small things to where it's like, you know, and it's kind of part of the point of the movie where, you know, he's doing all these things, whether he's like expanding the palace, getting the fresh new clothes, right? It's all just like
Getting the fresh new dames.
the dames, like
He's
it's
getting just like side pussy in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Like they're just like taking a walk in the field and he's just like, all right, pause in the action here. I choose that one. And they just like walk into the forest and there's just an ellipse of 5 minutes. And then they walk back and his wife's just like steaming. She doesn't even say anything to him, though. It's his mom who gives him the rolling pin about getting public side pussy.
yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a better transition into this here, Malcolm. You at one point you had said something about something being little, and I think another thing that by just kind of like whether or not I would say the intention is for you to find something funny, I feel like how small Louis XIV is very, very funny to me. Just seeing a man prance around in that getup as well. And I feel like those sorts of things, the unintentional like kind of comedy of just laying out like his like history right in front of you, or trying to like this idea of like committing to this truth in history like that, I think lays bare some of the absurdities of everything that is just kind of like an interesting political point to be drawn out from watching it unfold. Like watching a man do like kind of a little Lord Fauntleroy sort of saunter around where he goes into room from room, and there are like manners like about like hushed sort of like revere for how he should be. Again, it's just like all like, and I mean there's like an element of like chronological ethnocentrism on my end, where it's just like, now of course that's very funny because we don't live in that world there. But I think it is like, again, like that's always, especially with history that's so far in the past, like laying it out there like that, I think those like incongruities in like style and temperament just like show the absurdity of the past.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and like also, I don't know. I think that it also gets at a thing where it's like the whole inappropriate laughter rep audiences thing. You know, people are big scolds about that, and so I bet there's someone, you know, listening to this podcast shaking their fist, saying, "How dare you laugh at the rise to power by Louis XIV?" But it's like,
I don't. If that person exists, they need to go.
Well,
they need
also,
to,
it's just like if someone in 2025 is watching these movies at all, fucking great on them.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Like Jesus Christ.
I think
man.
there's definitely intentional humor within the movie.
Yeah.
I would say like it maybe it's not like the most blatant thing, but it's
or
like
even just like lightness.
Yeah,
you know, it's
yeah.
not all supposed to just be like deadly serious just because it doesn't have like super dramatic intent. It's the shading that Dave Kerr talked about. I think dramatic shading is there just as much as comedic shading.
Yeah, and there's like moments where characters kind of comment on the absurdity of the excess of process. You know, I like I kind of referred to earlier, where the Cardinal's dying, and you know we got, you know, fucking, you know, 1,700 people in the room, like gathering around him, and there's like, why isn't the king here? Someone asks, and there's like, oh yeah, he doesn't. It's not a good look to be in a room where like someone's dying. I just don't want to be associated.
What's it called? Optics.
Yeah, bad optics. Not a good look, Murrow. Yeah. I feel like that's presented humorously, just because it just seems, I don't know. It's to even point that out at all. I feel like it's to kind of show the absurdity of the idea of it. But I guess it's also Rossellini just wants everything on record. Everything, this all happened, so.
I should also say that when I was talking about him getting laid in the forest, they were not simply taking a stroll. It was during the hunt.
Oh, the hunt,
which is awesome.
Yeah.
That was like they were just like walking around while their hound dogs were chasing down like deers in the lake. It was insane. It was like also just photographically, this stuff's awesome. It's not like show-offy photography, but Rossellini knows what he's fucking doing in terms of framing and staging, and like if you're a master filmmaker and then you parse yourself down to quote unquote be more unadorned or whatever to just properly teach history, it's like you're gonna pull some crazy shit out of nowhere. Like I really do think that these films are like halfway between like Bresson and like Barry Lyndon, which are extremely different, or to be more specific, like Lancelot du Lac and Barry Lyndon for a Bresson period piece, where like realism and recreation and going by the history books is like super important and like teaching people the realness, but it's all about the different shades of drama, style, comedy, incident, etc.
Yeah, that hunting scene's great, especially once we kind of get more deep into the woods and like the dogs are like in the water or like chasing down the deer that's in the water. Now, this is a dumb question, but they didn't have guns back then, right? They didn't, or did they? Did they have muskets, or did they have guns?
I gotta think they definitely had some like powder based stuff, like powder based musket pistol type things back then.
I feel like we don't see it. It's like, how are they going to kill these deer that they're hunting? I feel like that's or do they have guns on them? Did I miss that? Or
I did not see.
Are
any
the dogs
pistols.
just gonna munch at these deer's neck until they die? I don't know. I'm sorry. It's just a question I had on hunting. Or the dogs just harass the deer and then it's like fishing. They like put them back in the wild.
Okay, so we didn't see them in the movie. There were like pistols there were pistols in France as early as like 1340 apparently.
Okay. Gun history. Extended clip presents gun history.
Yeah, exactly. But like there's a famous pair of flintlock pistols that were made for Louis XIV too.
Oh.
Yeah.
We needed some gunplay if that was it. If Rossellini really wants to depict everything, take us into the gun cabinet. Let's see the guns.
I agree.
Target practice. He could have been talking to Colbert doing a target practice.
Maybe it wasn't in the budget. I mean,
yeah.
You got to say these are TV productions. They're not exactly like big lavish films. Like,
true. You don't want the TV 14 rating because you showed a gun on TV.
This isn't Barry Lyndon as far as like production circumstances are concerned.
True.
So maybe you can't stage a giant duel like that. But
I
also,
know once you burn half the production budget on like puffy shirts, you're like kind of out.
We can't afford blanks,
You gotta afford all that food, all those plates and the cutlery. It's like they make him 24 crepes for him to have one bite of one of each flavor crepe, basically. It's so awesome. And I don't know. I was really compelled with this film the entire time. And I like that it goes out on like a poetic note of him just like sitting down and just like dropping some knowledge where he's like, neither the sun nor the dream can stand. Is that what it is? Hold on. I'm wrong on this one. I might have this quotable wrong. I'm just not even going to try on that one.
But paraphrase it. What is the quote? What is the quote saying?
Well, it ends with a little bit more of a poetic note about the sun and the dream, quote unquote, which I think gets at some kind of more abstract stuff that maybe the history of science films might get at later on. I don't know, but I just also now that I think about it, the sun thing, that's definitely just like some last second almost like Marvel style clue drops, because Louis XIV is, of course, referred to as the Sun King.
Oh.
Yes.
I mean, that ending, though, it's great because, we see him, eating, and he's dressed up to the nines, got the wig, got all the stuff for his cool outfit. Yes. And then he's just back in his room alone. He's kind of undressing, and then, like, doesn't the quote's also about power, right? Or something?
Yeah, the quote is also in reference to the sun, and he's called the Sun King because he's like the sun, and the nation of France, everything orbits around him.
Oh, okay.
That is the power that he holds, is not unlike this great sun, which is pretty sick.
Yeah. But
it's also an easy, like, fat joke, like Family Guy. Remember the gravitational pull?
Yeah, of course.
Who could forget?
This might be a little bit of projection, maybe, but it's kind of undercutting all the ceremony we're seeing. We're just seeing him alone in the room, kind of taking off the wig, and it kind of just seems like a little absurd. And he kind of gives a quote about power. It's like, this is what you got to do to get power, or something like that. That's like, this is what you got to do. Just that the ending seems to kind of be a commentary on everything that kind of came before it. And obviously this isn't a movie celebrating King Louis here, but it kind of, like, we don't really see, his plans in action besides, I guess, like that ceremony of him eating, but kind of like all that he talks about, or even like the big palace that he's building. We don't really see like a big finished version of the 15,000 capacity palace that he's building. We don't see like, the excesses of his kingly success. We kind of just see him in the room, and it's it kind of feels like a downer ending in a sense, I would say. Maybe I'm projecting that onto it, but I feel like it's definitely not a lively, legacy fulfilling ending. It's just him in a room.
Malcolm, do you have any other final thoughts on this movie and a bullet rating?
Yeah, I guess I'm gonna give it 4 bullets. I feel like the King Louis performance in particular is kind of interesting, especially considering that he's a non-professional actor, because he kind of talks. He's taking authority, right? Like, that's what he's doing. Yeah. He's saying, no more of these branches of government. If you're selling a nickel in Times Square, I want in. He's doing the Christopher Walken King of New York speech to all his co-workers. I can't think, all of his noble council, saying basically, I'm the council now. But the way he talks, there's like kind of like, he doesn't really have like so much authority to his voice. It kind of, I don't know, you could kind of, there's like almost like a weightlessness behind his voice, and maybe like, it's kind of like a weird mix where I would call it like there's a slight lack of confidence, but then he's kind of like overcompensating because he's trying to be confident in this moment, and like kind of, I don't know, I feel like he's like he's kind of, it almost sounds like he's reciting things, that he's supposed to say, and I don't know, I feel like you could kind of feel the tension of him feeling like he's this young king, and the council's been there forever, and they're all just assuming, oh, he wants to, go frolic in the woods with someone who's not his wife. He's not really interested in this government shit, and he kind of has to assert himself in that world, even though he is the king. I don't know, I feel like the acting style kind of portrays that tension well, and like I said, I feel like you get a different. I feel like I get a different type of pleasure in watching this movie, and watching more and more, like, getting on this educational didactic wavelength. I feel like the more I watch of it, the more I'm going to get in its groove. Not to say that I was discordant with it, but I kind of, while watching it, I'm like, I kind of have to, I don't know, I feel like there's a slight rewiring in how, what I expect out of a movie. So, it was good going to school old RR.
He's our new professor, RR, that I did run back this because, yes, in this last scene, he is talking about the usurping of power and the privilege that comes with holding power. But the final thing that he repeats to himself in this recitation as he's de-wigged himself is that neither the sun nor death can be gazed upon fixedly, which, you know, in modern English means you can't stare sun. You can't stare sun. Don't look right at the sun or you'll go blind, and or don't think about death too much or you'll die, basically. And for him to use that to transform himself into the Sun King, that which all of France revolves around, is like a very cool kind of cap to this rise to power origin story to me. I'm going to go 4.5 bullets on this one. I really adored this film, and like it's up there with my favorite of the few Rossellini's I've seen. I haven't seen all that much, but all of them have been fucking amazing, you know? And we've done podcasts on a few of them, so that's good. JT, what about you? Any final thoughts and a bullet rating here?
Yeah, I'm going to go 4 bullets. I think it's great. And like Malcolm, I do think, I don't know, it's just something that required a lot of like rewiring my brain while watching it, kind of figuring it out. And I like when we bring these types of things to the podcast, because I feel like not only is it just like a fun like conversational piece where I feel like it's like helping me figure it out through like I just think it like helps me figure it out too. So it's the podcast actually serves me to be like, oh wow, I kind of understand this movie now.
Yeah.
But yeah, the terrain in which like Rossellini is getting into like depicting reality here is just something that I don't know. It's just like talking through it is just something that's like so unique and weird, because it's just like you're never going to like recapture, like you can't like send like a documentary camera back to Louis XIV and be like, okay, we're just gonna pop this up here, check it out or whatnot. But it does its best to kind of like recapture the flavor and feeling of that, and like with that, like just kind of, I don't know, allows these like ironies in history and just sort of like weird absurdities of like the historical like power dynamics to emerge and kind of speak for themselves in like the like setting and story just like being laid bare in that sense. And I feel like especially like the narrative element to it, or like lack of like a propulsive narrative, like if you like are trying to like narrativize like a historical like sort of rise to power, there are ways to do it. I mean, there were like obviously Rossellini is like very accomplished at like having like making like a more traditional film that could like fit those types of narrative pleasures. But here, just like I don't know, like watching it unfold in this manner is just so strange and unique, and I feel like unlike, I don't know, I pretty much all the historical films that I've seen, especially one like about like a quote unquote like great man or great figure. Like the approach to storytelling with those types of figures, I feel like is either one of two ways, where it's just like, oh man, like this guy was cool as hell and we're going to have a story like sort of lifting them up, or they'll do like the reverse, where it's just like, all right, this is why this great powerful man was actually bad. And here it's just like eschewing either of those things, trying to like do the most possible like to not like give you like an explicit value judgment from like a story. Yeah, just very, very strange movie.
And one thing I feel like we failed to mention, I feel like it's like just in terms of this depiction of King Louis, it's kind of like maybe redefining how like power is seen, right? Because like you think of a king, maybe it's like, oh, like this king won all these great wars and they went into battle and they did the best head chop off and that's why they're king or something like that. Or they did something like so great and that's why, you know, they're nobility, they're the king. Whereas this, it's like, it's actually a very measured, you know, political moves made in-house, you know, with his advisor. And it's, you know, about pumping the propaganda machine. Like I feel like the last half of the movie, it's just King Louis in a meeting with Colbert and being like, you know, whatever we're doing, we just need to do it bigger. You know, that's basically like the summary of what they're saying. Like, you know, 13,000 rooms in this. Actually, let's make it 15,000.
But the thing is, like, those meetings, I love how the seriousness with which he's building out the new monarchy is equaled by the scenes where he's designing his new costume. You know,
Yeah.
like it's equal hand.
And I mean, he even says that, right? There's like a part where they're discussing that and he's like, oh yeah, and get me like this contact for a tailor. And like, this is just as important as the rest of the stuff because that's what the movie's about, right? Is like kind of like the power of King Louis, you know, it's asserted through all this like kind of propaganda stuff that he's doing. And like, that's what power is. It's not
appearances.
It's appearances. And it's, you know, giving off the impression that you are powerful. It's not like this noble thing that you won in war or because you solved everyone's problems. It's because, you know, he's peacocking it up.
And speaking of Peacock, you can watch the Rockford Files on Peacock.
You can watch the Taking of Power by Louis XIV on Peacock in its Rossellini history section that they just opened up.
JT, did you give a rating on this one yet?
Yeah, I said 4 bullets.
Okay.
4 bullets
We all did
again.
then. Yes.
4 more bullets.
Well, that's going to do it on The Taking of Power by Louis XIV by Roberto Rossellini and the first of our Rossellini history film series. You can always join us on Patreon for $5 a month and get an extra episode every single week. The last Patreon episode was a JT pick. It was the first TV movie we talked about this month. What was that one, JT?
It was Friends of Friends by Dominic Graff. Great, also European TV movie. A little bit more narrative propulsion in that one, but I think it'll be a little bit different from some of the other TV movies we tackle on the Patreon this month.
And surrounded by 2 of these Rossellini movies is Malcolm's next pick on the Patreon, who really is flying in the opposite direction of these movies.
Yes, I chose Cyber Seduction, His Secret Life. It's about a teenage swimmer who becomes addicted to pornography and starts neglecting his girlfriend and family. And his homework even worse.
It sounds like another Portrait of a Great Man.
And I mean, I heard we were doing TV movies. This is one of I'm a lifetime fan.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to bring this movie to the podcast. And I think this is, you know, if my memory serves me correctly, I think this is heralded. This is a lifetime classic.
Yeah.
Some people who are in those circles might know a little bit about Cyber Seduction, His Secret Life. So I'm excited to I think it'll be a very fun episode.
And then, of course, catch you next week on the main feed for Rossellini's Socrates. Also, you can send us your questions and comments at extendedclippodcast@gmail.com. You write it. I read it right here on the pod.
Yeah. Hey, you know, if you got some TV questions, TV movie thoughts, anything about TV, it's on the table right now.
We're only talking about TV up until the 30th of December when we do our 2025 Discoveries episode. And that's going to do it then. Goodbye, everybody. Don't know much about science book is a lyric in that song. And since I was like in 7th grade, it has killed me.
That feels very like childish, like referring to like the,
That's the point,
school
is because you're
textbook.
saying
Yeah.
you're stupid, but he does know about you and me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Saved
Hold on, I'm gonna have
saved
to-
it at the end there.
I'm gonna have to fact check this song real quick because I'm gonna drop it even if it's a song I would get sued into oblivion for. JT, you know what song I'm talking about,
Yeah,
right?
no, I thought he says science books instead of book, but maybe you're right, man. Maybe he says book.
Sam Cooke revised the lyrics of Wonderful Wonderful World to emphasize the theme of education.
Wait.
So maybe he didn't write it. It's like a more standard that he revamped, kind of. According to Genius, it says, don't know much about science book.
Oh, wow.
So, you know.
This is a confusing. So wait, he changed it to make it more pro-education. Is what the record books are saying.
And this is going to have to become back matter for sure. This cannot be how we start this fucking
You ever
episode.
hear that one song?
Okay, so
Back in the day.
1965, Herman's Hermits. No, but that's like 5 years later. This is recorded in 1959.
Okay.
Written by Lou Adler, classic man right there.
Where did you read that he changed the lyrics?
Honestly, I just Googled the song and that was like the Google AI thing that came up. That's definitely wrong. These Google AI things are always wrong. It's so funny.
Because I would say in those lyrics, he's kind of dismissing his education and kind of being like, well, as long as, I have this relationship, I don't need to know much about these subjects. Which
Oh, okay. I just reading the Wikipedia again, doing some LR as we are wont to do.
And I see that the Wikipedia has a citation from a book. Not a science book, but a book nonetheless. So JT, go ahead.
Cook appeared to be taken with song. He'd say, "What about that song, And then he'd start on it again, recalled Adler. Cook wanted to steer the song towards the subject of schooling, revised the song, and decided to cut it. Yeah, so I guess apparently in the unpublished original lyrics, it was less about education.
Oh, okay.
And then it's all about education. That's all the song's about, because I was introduced to that song because it was the song that at my middle school, a bunch of teachers had a band. That was the song they would play.
Interesting. You think them being educators themselves, they would pick a song that is a little bit more pro-learning, pro-curiosity, but...
Don't you understand irony?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about irony. That's
Yeah.
true.
You forgot about irony.
I failed to consider it.
Okay, so... All right, so before we went on this Sam Cooke digression...